Arcadian Vanguard presents the Wrestling News in your daily wrestling newscast for Monday, September 18th, 2023. Good morning, I'm Mike Sempervive. We begin with some unfortunate news. Longtime promoter and wrestler Golden Boy Emile Dupree has passed away at age 86, as was first reported yesterday by Slam Wrestling. Dupree was one of the last of the old-school territorial promoters, having regularly presented Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling, otherwise known as the Maritimes, out of Atlantic Canada from the early 1960s through the mid-1980s. Born Emile Gauguin, Dupree had a long wrestling career that began in 1955. He got his start in places like Montreal for promoter Eddie Quinn, Boston for Paul Bowser, and New York for Toots Mondt. He spent his early years as a journeyman in several promotions such as Vince McMahon's Capital Wrestling and Johnny Doyle and Jim Barnett's Big Time Wrestling in Detroit in the late 1950s. He founded Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling in 1961 and began to run shows in the Canadian provinces of New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. Known for its beautiful weather and minimal travel, the Maritimes was a summertime territory, leaving Dupree plenty of time to continue to tour as a journeyman wrestler throughout the 1960s and 1970s. Dupree slowed down his wrestling schedule in the late 1970s, but continued to wrestle occasionally in his home territory as late as 1988. He sold out his interest in the territory in 1986, and it eventually went under in 1990. Dupree resurrected it 11 years later and continued running independent shows in the Atlantic provinces well into the 21st century. Dupree was the father of Rene Dupree, best known for his run in WWE as part of La Resistance in the early 2000s. Once again, Emile Dupree has passed away at the age of 86. WWE came to Boise, Idaho last night with a SuperShow live event at the Extra Mile Arena. In the main event, Seth Rollins successfully defended the World Heavyweight Championship against Shinsuke Nakamura. The match marked the first time a WWE World title has been defended in Idaho in 6 years. Earlier on the card, Cody Rhodes defeated Dominic Mysterio in a street fight. In other championship encounters, Becky Lynch retained the NXT Women's Championship against Tiffany Stratton. Rey Mysterio retained the U.S. title in a triple threat with Austin Theory and LA Knight. And Finn Balor and Damian Priest successfully defended the undisputed tag team title against the LWO. In other results, Asuka pinned Charlotte Flair, Jey Uso beat Bronson Reed, and the team of Tommaso Ciampa and Alpha Academy defeated Imperium. In more WWE news, the company is expected to be holding a premium live event in Australia next year, according to a report in the West Australian newspaper yesterday. Optus Stadium in Perth will reportedly be the location for an event coming up in March of 2024 before the Australian Football League begins its next season. A major announcement is expected next week. The last major WWE event in Australia was WWE Super Showdown in 2018 at the Melbourne Cricket Ground. And before we leave you today, we'd like to remind you that however you consume your content, you can find the wrestling news 24 hours a day and 7 days a week across social media. On Twitter, follow us at Wrestling News AV. Our Facebook page is also Wrestling News AV. The Wrestling News can also be found on the Arcadian Vanguard YouTube page. And for those who utilize Amazon Echo devices, just tell Alexa to play the Wrestling News podcast. And remember to make sure you add podcast at the end. Once again, for daily updates, breaking news, and more, follow the Wrestling News across social media. And that's the news for today. If anything happens, we will be here to tell you about it. No clickbait, no paywall, just the Wrestling News. The Wrestling News is a division of Arcadian Vanguard, and the Wrestling Newscast is a production of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network.